So Yuri, super excited to be having you on the newsletter. Very excited for your book to come out. I know you've been working really hard on it for a very long time. Be your own commander in chief. That's something we could have used in 2020, my friend, or
Yes.
2019 or 2016. So tell me why you decided to write this book. Uh, now given that you've written previous books, you've been on Entrepreneur, you have a very prolific writing background. Why this topic? Why now? What are you hoping that me, fellow minds, entrepreneurs, and people in general get out of this new book?
First of all, Jared, always great to speak with you. Thanks for having me on. Okay, so why this book? This book grew out of my coaching experience, working with thousands of people who are mid-career millennials, usually kind of feeling stuck in their career. Sometimes those same mid-career millennials are already leading companies, and they're kind of feeling, okay, I've plateaued. What can I do to kickstart my company again? It's that inflection point. So for both of those situations, we look around at the world in 2020, right? Instead of saying, oh, everything is, massively different from before, it's it's kind of like an uncovering of what was really going on under the surface for a long time, right? So lack of leadership, that's a really obvious one. We're seeing that a lot of people are really not engaged in their work. A lot of people are putting window dressing on their business, trying to make it sound good and Instagrammable and all that good stuff. And it's been a time of reckoning, right? It's a point where we no longer have any choice to ignore our own personal and professional development. And the two things are not luxuries anymore; they're absolute necessities. Now, my perspective, I come in as a head of HR to different companies to build up their strategic HR function. So for me, both as someone who has done a lot of self-help work, both on myself, meaning that's by far my biggest investment in life, personal and professional development. And also what I do for people, whether again, coming in as a head of HR, I coach people, help them figure out their career pathways, how to do their work in a more productive, efficient manner. From both of those angles, there's a great need for leaders to not just say, oh, here's the whip, I'm going to crack it, and you do as I say. We're done with that. We're kind of past the point where companies can get away with that kind of perspective. So at this point, leaders have to be more transparent, they have to be more vulnerable, and they really frankly have to empower their employees to get that kind of personal and professional development. But okay, again, let's look out into the landscape of self-help. Right. So there are how many? Probably hundreds of thousands of titles put out each year, and all of them address either health, fitness. The second part is mind, mental models, life skills. The third part is how do you deal with other people? How do you win negotiations, business deals, etc. And once in a while you get something about spirituality, kumbaya, eat some organic food, make a fire on the beach, and be mindful, man. Right. So the point is that all of this self-help is wildly disjointed. And if you look around, I mean, maybe I haven't found it yet, but I haven't seen a comprehensive philosophy that says, okay, if you want to lead yourself, again, looking out into the world, no one's really leading. Right. So you got to do it yourself. How do you do that? Yeah, you can go out and read, thousands of books, but where are you going to end up? Not far. So the point is, I had to write that book because I didn't see it in the market. How do you combine those four parts, right? And also taking a little bit different perspective, not just top 10 ways to do something, or hey, what are those billionaires and endurance athletes doing? That's great, but most of us are neither, and we don't have infinite help. We don't have infinite resources. So how do you kind of hack things together, but in a thoughtful manner from the ground up to where you're in command of yourself, regardless of your station in life, whether your business is doing well or not, you know. So that's what this book is about. It's taking those four conversations, right? That's kind of for me the easiest way to approach behavioral change. You have to look at your language and your psychology, and they're really two sides of the same coin. So you go in and you look at your body. Okay, so what was I given and what am I supposed to do with it, right? And then you do an 80-20 analysis and you implement certain things. What do I eat and what do I not eat? How do I exercise and what do I not do to avoid problems? How do I approach immunity, for example? Then you move on to mental models. Okay, well, how do I manage expectations? How do I process information? How do I manage my stress? I mean, a year like this, right? And also, how do I go and manage my finances, manage my career, and figure out how to do my side hustle well, right? So all of those things are suddenly not just nice to haves, they're critical. There's no such thing as, oh, I'm just going to stay in this job for years. Good luck, buddy. Not going to work for you.
Yeah, a commander in chief doesn't have any nice to haves on the battlefield either. You know,
Correct. Exactly right. And
they have
then,
mission critical stuff, and then
yep,
it gets done, and they win the mission.
you got it. So you got to have that approach, right? And then the third piece, again, how do you deal with people? Okay, I mean, everybody knows how to deal with people in just kind of, a transactional way, or, okay, one off, I give you something, you give me something, right? But how do you approach that from a real set of core values where you know what you're really good at, what value you deliver, and then what do you need from other people? Sometimes it's a transaction, other times you can't expect anything because that person can't give you anything. So how do you do that from a set of kind of core principles, and how do you do it in a thoughtful way? And it's not just about your boss or your business partner. Yeah, it's your wife and kids too, right? And then the last part, this is something personally important to me, but I've also found that it's missing from the conversation. Right, most of us, we hear some kind of corporate kumbaya, and that sounds nice, or we might go through periods in time where things are really tough, and we're just like, we're looking for answers. Why me? Why now? What am I meant to learn, right? So whether you call that talking to God, or getting the vibes from the universe, whatever that is, you need to have that conversation, right? And all four of them mutually reinforce each other. Again, they're not just disjointed and things you check in to when you have a crisis, right? So the idea is, how do you not just prepare for a crisis, but how do you live a life that's full of clarity, meaning, impact, and success? And the idea is that the four of them make up kind of like the four propellers of a drone. So all four have to be talking to each other, and there's a kind of central hardware and a central software running on it. And what's in the book is that software. And essentially, once you're able to make the thing fly, all four have to work. And you see all the way up from a 30,000-foot perspective, what's going on in the landscape of your life, right? Most of the time, we don't have that visibility, and we don't have that kind of schedule. Oh, how do I put that in my schedule to make sure to check into all those things? So that's a big part of what this book is. And then the last part is, okay, I get it. I see the landscape. I see there's a really nasty festering problem down there on that continent. Maybe I'm really ignoring my health. So how can I take that same drone analogy and zoom in kind of like a special forces unit and go and address that, right? So that's another really important part of this. Yeah, you need to see the landscape and the map. You need to have a plan for how to address each piece, but also problems come up, right? You have nasty surprises, and you have to be able to go in and take care of that problem quickly. So that's the book.
Yeah, I love the analogies, and I love that it's a smorgasbord of ideas. To also give another analogy, uh, it's definitely holistic. It's an approach that considers that there's many variables, many of which are under our control, a lot of which aren't under our control.
Exactly.
You've been able to consider these things, and you're not perfect by any stretch, and neither am I, but you are certainly a busy individual. You're running two different companies with Master the Talk, with HR Talent and Systems. You're a family man, with 3 kids, right?
Yep.
You just had your 3rd kid in 2020, despite all the madness.
Right.
You are regularly contributing to all these different online mediums. You're writing your book, and now publishing and promoting the book. How tell us more about how Yuri came to be, and some of your background and some of your formative experiences, because I think that'd be really interesting for everyone to learn a little bit more about you as the author behind this book, and then also bring us into maybe some of those experiences that shaped your perspective and made you realize that a book like this would be meaningful, and that you were someone that should help usher in that message.
Appreciate the question. I'm going to try to be mercifully brief here. Well, I was born on planet Soviet Union, if that if that helps in my superhero story. I came when I was 9 to Kentucky, and then I went to college in Philly. And while I was in college, my picture was, okay, I'm going to be an MD PhD, because my 2 grandparents were doctors, and my mom was a PhD, and my father was very close. And then, I kind of saw, okay, there's this massive variety of subjects in the world, and I gravitated toward neuroscience and anthropology, how the brain works, and then how does that express itself out in the world through culture and kind of physical anthropology as well. So after I left college, I came to New York for a PhD program in neuroscience, and pretty much in that first year, it was clear this is not for me. I love the subject, but I have to have my finger in 10 soups. I really love that analogy because that's what my life has become, right? So since then, I've been in 6 different careers in neuroscience and law, finance, tech, and coaching and consulting. And it's a very short way to go through it, but it's a lot of upheaval, a lot of trying to figure myself out. Who am I meant to be? Am I meant to be a Russian kid? Am I meant to be a Jewish person who understands this background? Am I a lawyer, a financier, a techie, a consultant, coach? What the hell am I, right? So in the process, in the journey, trying to figure myself out, who am I? Who am I not? What people are meant to be with me on the journey and which people are not? How do I raise my kids now that I'm a father for the last 7 years, thank God, right? So a lot of those questions, they not just they swirl around, but I need answers because I need a practical output. I need a profession. I need to bring in revenue. I need to build a business. I need to make my wife happy, right? Good luck. So all of these things, came to coalesce essentially in this book. I'm someone who's maybe a little bit slow in some ways, slow in the sense that I need to understand all the layers of a problem, the human layer, the business layer, the physical and the metaphysical, right? So for me, that's why this book took a long time. I started out with kind of the simpler aspects of coaching. Okay, so how do I, again, teach someone to negotiate a deal or to win a job or to get promoted, all that kind of stuff, right? Or to make more in their new job or whatever. And that went to, okay, well, there's a million books out there on all of those things, but I'm consistently not seeing any sort of real life philosophy, right? I mean, it's not for lack of looking at, all the older philosophers and the work they've done. But again, that work seems, not as relevant without an updated language and contextualization for our generation and our time. So that's what I really feel had to be done. And that's what I feel like I did with this book.
Yeah, and it makes sense too. Yeah, I guess, or hindsight's 2020, because when I met you, you were scaling up Master the Talk. You still run that practice.
Mhm.
That's more of a one-to-one coaching practice for mid-level, very successful career people, but
Mhm.
very successful is $100,000 to $500,000 salary, but wants to go to the C-suite, wants to maybe leave and start their own business, wants
Mhm.
to maybe keep their business or keep their career growing and make more money, but also take care of the side hustle or the family, or just make things easier or get
Yep.
healthier. And then as as we developed our friendship, you've added HR talent and systems as a new business
Mhm.
after finding yourself sort of being the acting chief HR officer and sort of coming in and running different Inc. 500 or Inc. 5000 teams and helping them sort of at organizational levels, going one-to-one coaching consulting to then 1 to 100 or 1 to hundreds of people.
Yep.
So I'd like to really hear from you about 2021 and beyond, remote work, how we're going to get groups of people to achieve at the highest levels and solve problems, because many companies are at war or are going to enter periods of war in the next year or 5 years or 10 years. The world's changing around us, but I do believe it starts at the individual level, as I imagine you would agree. And so if we go to Master the Talk and some of the work you do with sort of mid to high level career people, what have been some of the most common challenges that your clients have faced, and what does it look like to work through some of those challenges, perhaps using some of the elements that you included in your book?
Great question. Yeah, it's 2020 has been a learning experience for all of us. I'm putting that in a very polite way. As a head of HR, the first thing you notice when everyone goes remote is that it's very, very hard to keep tabs on people, quote unquote, right? Again, leadership is always like command, control, right? So the first thing is like, crap, I don't have a great command. I don't have much control. What are those people actually doing, right? That's the verbiage you keep hearing from the CEO, for example. So the first thing to do is to open up all those different channels of communication, right? So let's say you have a practical example. So I run HR for a home health company in the Bay Area, which is an Inc. 5000 company, right? So this company has continued to grow despite 2020, right? And it's an Inc. 5000 company for 4 years, and all of the systems are straining, right? There's just such a massive volume of healthcare that needs to be delivered in the home, and you need to scale up, you need to hire more people, you need to onboard them, you need to train them. And there's a point where it's not enough to just say, hey, we're a family culture, because that's kind of how all companies start. We're a family culture. So at this point, it's the challenge is, okay, how do I make sure the communication is visible? So visible just in the sense that, like, I feel people are doing work. Okay, so some people are on the phones, there's intake. Some people are out in the field, they're delivering care. There are marketers who are driving between different hospitals and territories. So how do you keep tabs on people? Somebody's sitting in Salesforce, somebody's using Tiger Text, which is kind of a secure messaging platform. Someone sends an email, someone sends a text. It's crazy, right? It's a totally crazy situation. So I come in, I'm an architect. I have to think about how do I, create a strategy to make sure people actually understand the different parts of the company, what's going on, what's our performance, what are our plans. It's very hard. Information asymmetry is a weapon that leaders unfortunately use in the wrong way. So I come in and I say, all right, let's connect all those pieces to Slack, for example. Let's create all those different threads. Let's make sure that, people feel open to share what's actually going on. But also, if they don't feel so comfortable sharing that there's a problem, sometimes a festering problem, let's make sure we have an anonymous channel for that as well, right? So you start giving leadership a visual kind of flow of a conversation. They're talking with one person, they're talking with one group, with operations, with HR, with marketing, sales, etc. So you have a much better view on what's actually going on because you have one source of truth, which now becomes Slack, for example. So that's one. Number two, you have to go out, whether you're doing it remotely over Zoom or whatever the case is, you have to get vulnerable. You have to say, as a leader, okay, I get it. I myself, what do I do? Yeah, I'm a coach. That's great. But I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 businesses. My kid was just born in March, right? So I have to go and I have to give people my story. What am I going through? Or what have I been through that's similar to their current situation? Right? What that does is it doesn't somehow put me lower on the totem pole. In fact, it makes me more relatable, and it makes people say, "Oh, okay, he gets it." Like, yeah, he thinks things are not all smiles and unicorns and rainbows, right? I mean, I'm overstrained with my job because we're understaffed. That's kind of what the employee is thinking, and I don't have the right software, I don't have the right resources, and I'm expected to do a million things in a very manual way. Right. So I have to get them to share that with me. Then I have to clear the road. That's the leader's job. I have to go and clear the road and get them software, get them the right information, give them visibility, help them to, give me what are their challenges and gaps, right? And then go solve them. Don't just chew on it and talk about it. So my job is, I'm creating a back channel to leadership to say, hey, this is a real problem. Let's address this. Let's get software. Let's hire more people. So I'm kind of helping to direct traffic. And as head of HR, that's a lot of what I do. But also I have to go and sit with each person one-on-one over Zoom, coach them, take them through my methodology. What's your life mission? What are your values, your outcomes, your role, your negative scripts, your founding stories? And let's help you figure out what your job looks like in a year. What do you need to do to grow? What training do you need? What software do you need? How do we help you to grow and progress through the organization so that you're still here and still doing your best work a year, 2, 3, 5 from now? So this book also becomes a platform where I can dip into any of those different jars and say, okay, yeah, maybe, you need some training on how to manage expectations, because guess what? You keep promising things to, the COO, but you're not delivering. So why don't we work on that? And, here's a description of how to think about it. Here's a list of steps you need to take to address that, what language you need to use, and so on. So, that's another great resource I've essentially put together, where I can go in as a head of HR, help people one-on-one with any of those things, help leadership with any of those things, because it's very much a two-way street, and start the right kinds of conversations, and then put them systems on top. That's how things work in the right way. Otherwise, it's just more software to use, and who the hell needs this? How does this help my career?
Right. And when should companies consider bringing in an acting chief HR officer, an acting head of HR, or a consulting firm like an HR talent and systems versus graduating to having a full time chief HR officer or a full time head of HR, or sort of developing those capabilities internally?
Great question. So there are certain parameters that I've seen that make a lot of sense. Usually the problem is that the founder CEO sees a massive crisis, usually in talent acquisition. We're not able to get enough talent to come here. We're not able to get enough of our top people to stay here. So then it's a crisis scrambling mode. Don't let yourself get to that point, because that means there are many other deeper problems in there, and you need crisis intervention, and it's a much steeper kind of learning curve. So I would say that, you need someone relatively early when you're, let's say between 30 and 50 people headcount in your company. You need to start not just thinking about it, but at least engage somebody to look at what your current situation is. Odds are, I mean, if nothing else, you're wasting a lot of money on some kind of crappy broker for your insurance. And, by migrating to a more centralized kind of system, let's say PO, you can probably save $100,000 like that. And you can use that money maybe to hire that consultant to build an HR strategic function, or anywhere else in your company, right? So I would say that don't let things go to a crisis. Don't think that your recent funding round is going to massively sustain your, candidate pipeline and all of that. It's a fool's errand to think like that. And beyond that, really, this should be baked into the core of your company. You should understand that your employer brand is a reflection of how you do things. So if you do things, like some kind of a frat house, people are going to know about it, right? Because your ambassadors they're gonna talk about it in a certain way. People that work in the company or have worked there. So you have to build things really from the beginning in the right way. That's where you do need someone who is not just an HR person, but who can speak the language of the various functions. So that's my perspective. That's an ideal situation, but I know that most founders will default to, oh crap, we don't have enough talent, or our top talent is leaving. Help me fix the problem. That's usually when they bring me in.
And then if you're an individual at a major company, that sort of mid-level career person, in a perfect world, I imagine your employer is giving you some executive coaching or some coaching or sort of leadership development training, either with an internal coach or they're giving you a budget to go to conferences, take courses, bring on coaches. But a lot, if we're honest, a lot of times that falls on the individual to make that decision.
Yep.
And so when should and how should mid-level career people who are doing really well think about bringing on an executive coach like yourself, or even if they're an entrepreneur like myself, when should we bring on a coach? How should we think about the investment and what we want to get out of it? And then how do we pick someone like yourself versus just like the sea of coaches and consultants out there? So yeah, when do you decide to get a coach? Why should you decide to get a coach? And then how do you choose the right coach?
Okay, so when I think, frankly, again, for me, I invest year round. I've been investing for years. It's my number one investment in personal and professional development. What I've realized is that, whether I'm working in house at a company or I'm working for myself, the business I'm in is just four walls. Four walls I've more or less imposed on a certain time period, right? In order to, complete projects, get paid for it and move on. So the trouble is that when you look at things in that disjointed manner, hey, I'm just here for, a year, 2, 3, 5, whatever, you're not thinking about far into the future. What kind of human do I want to be? What does success look like to me, let's say in 10 years? And now how do I work backwards to achieve that success? So the trouble with, let's say, an internal coach is that, there's a trust issue. What are that coach's incentives? Because if that person's working for the company, their first loyalty is to, guess what, the company, not to you. So that fundamental piece is an issue for a lot of people. They don't feel like they can fully trust that coach. However, I just saw this on a post the other day. Apparently now there's something like 6 million coaches on LinkedIn, or some insane number, and that's gone up from 2 million before the.
Well, admittedly, that surprised me during the pandemic. I thought that the pandemic would actually lower the amount of authors, the amount of coaches, consultants, and in fact, I think it probably raised the amount, because when people were losing their corporate jobs or wanting to do something different, that was an easy speaker, author, consultant turn out of corporate. Or if they lost their previous job, or if their business wasn't doing well, that was something they could go to. So that was actually a surprising element of the pandemic for me personally. Which makes it all the more challenging for someone like you to find the right clients and convince them to work with you. And so, again, I guess you talked about the when in your career, how then should we think about finding the right person?
Sure. So I think a lot of it is you have to go back to your principles and values, right? I don't mean to sound like a Midwestern preacher here, but excuse me. Basically, you need to think about where do you want to go? Okay. Even in general terms, maybe you don't know the exact destination. You want to go to a Fortune 500 company, or you want to start your own, but you need to think about general direction. And then you need to think, who can I find? Again, there are lots of platforms. You have the Muse, you have Go Coach, you have Leg Up. I mean, Torch, there's 1,000 of these things. Bravely, you need to look for the things that essentially signal success to you, not someone else's success. Like that person has been successful, but specifically in where you want to go. That person has built an Inc. 5000 company in healthcare. Okay, so now they're coaching on the side, or maybe that's their full-time thing. Okay, you need to think about, where has that person been that you want to go to? Where is that person at least 2-3 steps ahead of you in terms of achieving something that you want, so that they can walk you through that now? It's not someone who was there 20 years ago, because that's largely useless. And it's not someone at the same level as you, or maybe one step ahead, because that's also not that useful, right? You want to look forward to something that's well baked. Okay. So that's one. You can look at platforms and filter by subject matter expertise or experience, or so. Of course, look at their social proof, their testimonials. You have to make sure the person's legit. They've done enough. They've put in enough hours to this to really be solid in their methodology and delivery and accountability and all those kinds of things. And talk to some past clients. Don't kind of skimp out on doing that, because I think that's very important. But it has to feel right in your gut as well. The person has to kind of speak your language, and they need to understand who you are and where you're going. So have that initial conversation and just feel out a few candidates, because I think that's the best thing you can do.
And last question on the Master the Talk side of things real quick. So tell us more about that business and how people can work with you in different capacities, who an ideal client is for you, some of the outcomes that people have gotten from working with you. Yep. I want to jump to maybe future looking HR trends and remote work trends next, but I don't want to discount all the hard work you've done, in building Master the Talk. So quickly tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so a couple recent examples. Actually, my best clients actually went through this analysis with a coach of mine named Jared. We looked at the best clients that I've had over the years, and there's a pretty consistent theme. These are people that are either in the C-suite or right below. And usually they're either in finance or marketing, or they're coming out of a Fortune 500 company wanting to go to a smaller one, or they're kind of floating between consulting and full-time. So that kind of person, one relevant example, I've been working with someone who's a C-suite level marketer. She used to work at Amazon, and she's gone through a succession of different startups, both full-time and consultant. And in her situation, she's very clear on what she wants. She's clear on what kinds of companies fit her criteria. The real, I would say, gap was, okay, how do I negotiate? Right? She has no trouble getting interviews. She's very good at explaining her value. That part is pretty straightforward. But at that last point, how do I demonstrate my value? Because, hey, they recommend, they offered something below my expectations. So I literally had a 15-minute conversation with her. I kind of put everything back on the right shelves. And I said, look, here's what you should expect. Be very clear about your waterfall of priorities, between base, bonus, 401k, benefits, whatever. And, you're not having to move. So price that in, but still stick to your guns. She's like, well, they're offering me basically 50K below where I'm expecting, but I don't have to relocate. I'm like, I don't care. It doesn't matter, right? Price yourself the right way. And as a result of this conversation, she very quickly was able to get 25,000 more, just like that. And she's very happy. She's going to take it, and off she goes. And other people that have come out of, let's say, iBanking or asset management, I've worked with a lot of people in finance. Usually, they're looking to, at least keep their lifestyle more or less. If they're going to a startup, it's obviously harder, but not impossible. And then the question becomes, how do I tell my story so that it's not like, hey, cool startup, bro, can I join? Right? Because that's kind of the association founders have, like what the hell, man? Like, it's so obvious. So how do you tell your story in a genuine way that relates to the mission and the values of the company, and show why you belong there and why you're really excited about it in a non-bro kind of way? And so the storytelling is the most important part with that pipeline. And then, you go through the process, you feel it out. It's more like due diligence. I know who I am. I know where I'm going. Does this opportunity fit me and where I'm going? Then it's a conversation. Yeah, let's negotiate and make sure the terms are right. That's the usual situation.
Well, and it helps that, to go back to all these war game analogies, what the battlefield looks like in terms of the different jobs these people are going for, or if they're building the side hustle, you know the steps of building a business, and many types of businesses. You develop a relationship with these people over time, so their competencies and zones of genius and potential weaknesses as someone on the battlefield. And then you can help them make the tactical decision. At the end of the day, they're firing the gun, but if they've done all the proper training, and then have someone like you to guide them, then hopefully they're hitting their target.
I think the key piece, I just want to drop this in quickly. I've literally sat around the entire table. So now as a head of HR, I can also say, hey, let me show you what's in that black box, right? When you ask for something, what happens behind the scenes, right? How does HR talk to leadership and decide, do we up the offer? Do we say, screw it? That alone, that visibility makes the person say, wow, I feel so much better. So much relief, because now I know the mechanics. I know what's behind the black box. And that by itself already, makes the person more confident, saying, yeah, I'm going to ask for what I'm worth.
Yeah. So, I mean, if we look into the future, none of us have a crystal ball. But we were in a meeting in the Minds deep dive in December, and we were talking about just different trends for 2021 that we should all be aware of as entrepreneurs, business owners, community leaders. And we were also, thinking just into the future. And you had brought up a few remote work trends to consider. And, we all sort of hear the buzzwords, but how are you thinking about, HR, about talent, about remote work, everything we've talked about in 2021 and beyond? And what does that mean for us as entrepreneurs, as leaders of companies or within companies? How should we think about preparing ourselves for future battlefields, perhaps unknown? I'd love to hear your 2 cents on that.
Sure. excuse me. So the first piece is you have to get used to a new reality. The new reality is neither fully remote nor fully back in the office. I think most companies will have a much more hybrid kind of approach because, again, we don't know the end game quite yet. We don't know exactly when enough people will have the vaccine for everybody to go back to the office. I think the cat's out of the bag. I don't believe that everybody will magically, like sheep, get back on the subway every day and do their thing. I don't think that's practical. You can't expect it. So you have to rotate people in, a third every week, maybe come in. You have your regular, Zooms and whatever, but you do have some return to, okay, let's get around the table, get all the information out. That's a lot more efficient than a Zoom call with 10 different people. Number one. Number two, there's a really big focus on mental health and physical health, right? So a big part of how companies have to adjust their benefit strategy, for example, and onboarding has to do a lot with how do we address the animal and the elephant specifically in the room of mental health, right? Because people are, again, they're alone, they're sitting far from their family, very alienating. A lot of the time onboarding is very difficult during a remote time because you a lot of information, not just language, but body language, even more so, gets exchanged in person, and that's missing now. So there has to be some readjustment to go back to get elements of that. We can't have it maybe full time, but we'll have a better arrangement where not everyone has to be on the subway every day or in their car. Not everyone has to be just on Zoom and alienated from the big picture. So that's another piece. And then how do we help people, again, get coaching, get therapy, help them to share more of their full experience. All of this is very important. We can't go back to this kind of corporate environment of everybody holds to themselves and smiles. That's also not really realistic to go back to. And in terms of in terms of other trends, I mean, I would say that the role of HR is also very different. It's no longer just keeping the status quo, no longer just legal and compliance. It's also about, how do we give people a constant sense of growth and learning and development. And it's no longer just about only the executives get coaching or only they get the budget, but everyone has to get that now because everyone has to reskill, upskill. There's a constant battle to make sure people are more productive, more effective in their job. Everyone feels like they have a career pathway. Now everybody's asking, hey, I want to move up. How do I do it? So there's no longer any reticence among millennials or Gen Zs about asking for what they want because we're long past that point. We're not just going to hear, pay your dues, pay your dues. Those days are gone. Those are some of the major trends I'm seeing, but others I'm happy to discuss offline.
And, again, that goes back to taking some individual ownership of this. You hope that your company gives you the resources that you need. If you work at a company, if you're an entrepreneur, you hope that what you're doing today to build your company culture allows for constant coaching and learning and development with your core team and with anyone that interacts with your company, employees, consultants, maybe even clients are enriched by working with your company. That would be the goal, right?
Yep.
And so, to go back to your book, in a perfect world, the types of companies that would be hiring HR talent and systems, buy hundreds of copies and give it to their employees. And that's one way that they can sort of foster their own learning and development goals. Hopefully people, listen to this and they go buy a copy, but that is only the start of the journey. I find these days that we buy a lot of books, but then we don't actually read them. So, if step one is either buying a copy of the book or being given a copy of the book, if your organization buys a copy for you, let's say, or if you're a leader and you buy hundreds of copies and give it to your employees, read the book is number two. But within that, how do you hope that people absorb this information and then execute on the ideals in the book? Like how should we read the book to get the max benefit from it?
Great question. The book is designed to get to almost any kind of, learning style that's more or less discredited, the whole theory, but people do absorb information and put it into practice in different ways through different channels. So I would say that the book is specifically structured. There are quotes with each chapter. There's a personal story. There's an approach to how is this done now? How is this seen now out in the world? And then going into, this is how you should approach it. Here are your 10 steps. Here's your visualization. Here's your metaphor. Here's your analogy. Here are further resources if you want to go further down this rabbit hole. So the book is specifically structured to almost get to anyone, regardless of their approach or their style. And that's by design. But of course, you can pop into the book at any time. If you feel like, think of it as a pyramid or a sliding scale. At the bottom is your health. Without that, you have nothing. Number two is your mental models and life skills, right? How do you approach the world? How do you deal with what comes your way? Number three is how do you deal with people? So again, how do you approach that from a systematic perspective, or do you just sort of do things in a willy-nilly way? And the last piece, all the way up top, on the top of the pyramid or the mountain or whatever you want to call it, is how do you relate to God or the universe? How do you contextualize yourself within the massive scale of the universe and compared to microorganisms, right? Where do you sit in this scheme? What is your corner of the world, and what do you do with it now? Okay, and then that enables you to go either at the very top of it, if you feel like you've got the bottom three covered, and say, okay, well, I'm not really clear on, my spiritual side of things. So let me kind of start with this, what's in the book, and let me go, figure that out for myself. Maybe I read some online, maybe I go talk to a rabbi, priest, or minister, maybe I talk to a friend who's gone through their own journey, but at least it gives you a clear picture. What do you need to focus on? And if you feel like you've fallen off the wagon in any of those ways, just go down the pyramid and start there and go up from there. And then, you can always think about, I'm building a course that is going to be connected to this book. So that's another layer that you can engage with in a deeper, more profound way. Of course, I can come in and speak about it. I can structure a program for learning and development within the company. I can come in as a head of HR. All of those are options as well.
Well, Yuri, thank you for your time. I know that there's multiple jump off points, and there's going to be different people that end up consuming this. Largely it's entrepreneurs, people like you interact with regularly in Meeting of the Minds. Hopefully, this gets shared with some heads of companies as well who may look at HR talent and systems. And who knows, maybe some corporate entrepreneurs check this out. So where can we get the book? Where can we go find you for Master the Talk for HR Talent and Systems? I can include all the links below, of course. But where should people go after listening to this and being spellbound by you and all your experiences and everything you can bring to the table?
First of all, thank you again, Jared. Wonderful conversation as always. Very simple to find me, yurikruman.com, and that leads to both, the HR Talent and Systems, Master the Talk Consulting. There's a link to buy the book. But if you want to go directly to the to the order page, it's byocic.com. That's Be Your Own Commander in Chief, byocic.com.
Very good. Well, thank you. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you very much, Jared.
Cheers.